core of what we do is Castles and Crusades. We used to be a D20 publisher. We shifted all of that to CNC once Castles and Crusades came out. So I think we've done one D20 book in the last 2 years, and we won't be doing any more in a year. We won't be doing 4th edition products. So Castles and Crusades is our core product. The Crusaders a magazine we do. We've done fiction products under the Chenault and Gray bandwagon. Then we've done some of Gary Gygax's properties, the Gygaxian Fantasy World series and Legendary Adventures. We just released Gourd by Gary Gygax. And then on the other side of the coin, we are launching, the process of launching a series of games that are related to the Siege engine, but different games, the Star Siege. And then Davis has, for a long time, wanted to do just games, you know, Shira board games. He's got Cleaver the Pit that we worked on for years. So we're just kind of branching in that direction. But the core is Castles and Crusades, without a doubt. You can try anything. And you don't have to open a book. You just have to say, I swim the river. And the CK is going to try to figure out quickly whether you can swim or not, and whether the river's current is too hard or whatever, and then you just make your dexterity check or strength check or whatever the CK wants it to be. The Siege engine is the main mechanic that drives Castles and Crusades. Basically, you have your 6 attributes and your base score to succeed at anything you're trying to do, any skill or whatever. It's 12 or 18. If it's primary attribute, your base score is a 12. If it's a secondary attribute, it's an 18. You add your level to it, you add your attribute bonus, and the Castle Keeper is going to adjust it by whatever difficulty he wants to have on there. That's Siege engine. That's how you resolve all non-combat conflict is resolved that easily. And I think when people play it, they're kind of introduced to the ease of play, which is the germ of the game's success. And then once they play it a couple of times, I think that they get kind of addicted. We play tested the basic set, part of the basic set not too long ago with some neighborhood kids. And I was stunned at how much joy they got out of the game. They'd never heard of this. They'd never heard of tabletop role-playing games. They'd never heard of any of this sit down with your buddies and roll dice killing each other. They were just jumping over themselves, having a ball. And it hit me then that there's actually a whole demographic that we aren't even marketing to. Everybody says, oh, the video game has stolen our players. Well, that's actually not true. We're just not marketing it to them because they don't even know we're out there. And there's a good chance that they like hanging out with their friends. They're going to keep playing. It's like I said earlier, when we started this entire conversation, I played Dungeons and Dragons as a kid. But I collected comic books. I was on skateboards. I rode my bicycle. I climbed. I spit. I did all that. I played Army Man. I did it all. Dungeons and Dragons was a part of it. It doesn't have to be the only thing you do. So there's no reason that kids who are playing online role-playing games can't stop on a Saturday afternoon and play some Castles and Crusades or something. There's no doubt Gary Gygax is my mentor. I mean, he became this kind of font that I would tap whenever I would need to, and he was always so open with information that I don't know, he taught me a whole lot of stuff. He taught me a good way he taught me the importance of dealing with people, how to deal with people. I've always been good with folks, but he kind of taught me that the fans are the #1 thing to any of these endeavors. I mean, we make these games, we might think this, or we might want to market this, or we might want to price it or here, or whatever that we're doing, but to Gary, and always to Gary, the absolute most important thing to him were the fans of the game. One of the most I hate the word disappointing, but heartrending things, I think, that has come out of his passing. Gen Con 2007, I don't know what happened, but he was there. He was the guest of honor. I'm sure that had a huge part to do with it. Peter Atkinson bent over backwards to honor Gary. Atkinson's a great guy. That staff was phenomenal. We did some signings at the booth, about 4 or 5 of them or something, and the turnout was enormous. Not only did we devote half of this very large booth that we had to Gary, because by that time we had all of his LA stuff out, we had GFW out, we had some of his Castles and Crusade stuff out, we had some of his odd and end things that he had done to us out. So we had this huge wraparound section devoted to Gary. And when we do these autograph sessions, people would line up. The line would go out, down the aisle, a couple of blocks down the aisle, and vanish. We had to get the booth, it wouldn't close down, but we had to get everybody out just to police people to keep it running. And this was every day, every autograph session. It was phenomenal. I mean, we were just amazed. And I think he was tickled pink. And then he saw that the book that he had there, the Eastmark Folio, had just released, and it just blasted off the shelves. I mean, we couldn't keep it there. And of course,
Trollord Games, join the fray.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Trollord Games, Worlds of Gary Gygax. With a special AMA today with Stephen Chenault. That's awesome. Grace Karras, Davis Chenault's chair, and Dan Cross will be joining us as well. We are doing a giveaway, so for any of you folks that's over on YouTube or Facebook land, you will have to come over here to our Twitch stream, unfortunately, to raffle up if you'd like to. All you got to do is Expert Sport Raffle. We're giving away some $10 codes on the store for some PDFs. And that's all I've got to say. Steven, take it away.
All right. This is Ask Me Anything. Today is February 27th, 2024. You know, I always have to look at the computer to remember what year it is. I can't keep up. Everything just blends together anymore. And we are here to mostly focus on the Gary Gygaxian World books. But obviously, any questions you have in the stream or chat, throw them out here, and we will do our best to tackle them. But we're gonna turn it over to Grace and let her start the conversation off.
Well, hi, friends. First question that people are dying to know: how are you?
How am I?
How are you all? Yes.
I'm actually doing great. This has been a very productive 2 weeks. Actually getting a lot of writing done, finished War Mounts. I started the Ava and Uric stuff finally at last. Got a small chunk of that done. And the more importantly to all of what I'm doing specifically is the Player's Handbook. I'm all the way through page 128, having completely purged the SRD from it. And all of the spells, of course, are really to about page 200 and something is purged of the SRD, which is fantastic.
Just picturing it like a wave of righteous justice, like
yes,
burning words from the page.
I'm loving it too because it really is us finally taking ownership. You know, Davis and Mac created the game years ago, but they borrowed descriptive text and chunks from whatever. It's all going to be gone now.
It's all original.
Even introductory sentences that said something like the spellcaster uses arcane spells, I changed it.
Wow, is that OGL?
Well, apparently, because Jeremy's using software that picks up anything that we copied from the OGL and put it in, and you can see
Wow.
where Mac or Davis tinkered with it. And if he highlighted it, I changed it. So
Sure. That's awesome. Well, while we're waiting for Dan Cross to come back, Lion Dove on YouTube said, I like aired with the AIHRDE spelling, but I think ERDE has a nice ring to it. Funny you should say.
Yes. Funny you should go on, kid.
Hey,
Tell 'em.
welcome back, Dan.
Hi, I got lost.
Welcome back.
It's been a long trip.
Dan has joined the adventuring party. So for everyone out there, this is Dan Cross. I've known Dan Cross Davis, and I've known Dan Cross for many decades. He actually was the first writer that Gary hired to work on material with him back in 2001, right, Dan? Or 2002, maybe 2001, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Do you hear
And,
me?
and,
Do you hear me?
and
Yes. Yeah.
we can hear you, yes. And the World Builder. You co-wrote the World Builder with Gary.
Yes. And then City A.
Yes, and in the Insidia, and you were working on, I don't know if you remember this, when he crossed over, you were working on the second World Builder. We were going to do a third printing of the World Builder you guys had written, but you had started working on a second World Builder, the World Builder 2.
Yes, I think that was under threat of torture if I didn't. Yeah. And you aptly named Insidia because it was insidiously difficult to write.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
happy
we
to
were
have it
probably-
on the record by the author that it is indeed pronounced Insidiae.
There you
There was
go.
some debate last time.
If it's not, then I'm wrong.
Well, shit, now there's no authority.
I'll have to ask a Latin teacher. I'll blame Steve.
Yeah,
Is
you
it-
always blame Steve. We like to blame Davis because we send people his email and he doesn't answer his email, so it works out quite well. It's a nice balance in things.
It's like the
Take turns.
recycling bin of blame.
Yeah, ask Chuck. He's the one who checks my troll alert email. I don't even go to it.
So Lucretia says, so there's going to be a reprint without the OGL stuff. Yes, absolutely. Second quarter, this quarter, of course, we'll be focusing on the Gygaxian Fantasy World series. But second quarter, we're going to dive into the reprints of the Castles and Crusades core books, the Monster Book, the Player's Handbook, and the CKG. And they will be purged of material and all of that sort of stuff. Do what, Dave?
I have to answer Wolf Alone's question. They were third graders, and I don't know if I won or lost because I walked away with a pink hat.
You
And the
won.
others got what? All of the flesh from your finger.
Oh yeah, no, there was a barbed wire accident. So
Yes, Statler, he's constantly migrating about.
I had to fix that with duct tape.
Which,
By the way, we need duct tape in one of the essential books or whatever. I have
true.
a thing of duct tape because duct tape should be like every party of adventurers everyone should carry duct tape, like a roll of duct tape, huge roll of duct tape.
When was tape even invented?
I really honestly don't know. I have no idea.
I missed something significant in the World Builder then. I'm so sorry.
But duct tape, just imagine everything that duct tape can fix. Literally from broken bones.
Davis.
What?
Sparky said, and he speaks with some authority, that gnomes invented duct tape. So do you really want the duct tape in the books?
I'm going to have gnomes wrapped in duct tape.
Hey,
Duct
Dan,
tape was
go ahead.
Great costume.
Duct tape was originally invented by Johnson & Johnson's Permacell division during World War II for the military. They needed a waterproof tape that could be used to keep moisture out of ammunition cases, according to groundfloorhomeinspection.com.
Like my house needs an inspection.
Dan, we did have a question specifically for
Yeah.
you. Did you see that, Grace?
I sure did. Dan, what was the creative process with Gary like? Sparky wants to know.
He was, well, I can tell you a story that in part answers that. other than what he described himself, which, he'd get up in the morning and he'd work 12 hours a day. And as he'd stand in a seminar and talk to the crowd, and they'd ask him, what kind of, joyous existence must it be that you have? And he says, I work. With that, he did. He worked tirelessly. But I remember when I first came up with the idea of the world builder, it was simply a combination of like a book called Descriptionary that I'd seen, which I thought was pretty cool. And I think Troller put out another book that was similar, like almost like the Thesaurus. Was it Jim Ward?
We are. I'm so sorry to cut you off. We are having like an echo problem.
Echo?
From who?
It should be.
I'm not hearing it, but
It's
all
fine.
of chat is hearing it.
Chat always freaks out.
I'm
It's
so
fine.
sorry.
It's because I joined. It's
Sorry,
fine.
friends.
It'll be all right, everybody.
better.
It'll be okay.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Does
Please
that
continue.
that means that everything I say will have twice the impact?
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I had written to him and I said, all those appendices in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition are amazing, and I really wish you'd write a whole book of that. Wouldn't that be cool? And he wrote back to me, he said, that's a great idea. You do it.
It's a great idea. You do it.
And I said, Gary, no. There's no way. Well, he started to write me an email after the first email he sent me after that suggestion was a list of things. Originally, the book was called The Book of Listing Things, and he said, oh, now look what you've gone and made me do. So part of his creative process was just inspiration, and he definitely was one for camaraderie and for collaboration, which I loved about him. So that's how I ended up co-authoring it, because I couldn't say no then. He had already started.
And he was very like welcoming then into like, it wasn't like a territorial, this is my thing that I'm working on. He was like, come in and please help.
No, the way he came across was almost like the grandfather I just didn't know I had yet.
Wow.
He was extremely friendly. And I remember when I first wanted to approach him, of course, it's like if you're a musician and you're approaching David Bowie and it's like, oh my God, I'm not worthy. I think of Wayne's World. I'm not worthy, and I was like in my early 20s. And I remember I stopped in the hall. I thought, I can't approach him, it's because it's like my childhood hero, right? Watching like the cartoon and all that. So when I approached him, he's just like, yeah, sit down, take a character. And he's very inviting. His aura was inviting.
Yeah.
It's interesting talking about his working. I sent Grace asked for some comments that Gary had made on the GFW series, so I had to dig into some of the emails. I've saved a good chunk of the emails that we sent back and forth over the years. And the one cracked me up because I asked him about, I think it was the second world builder. He said something about making a pun, but he got distracted. And then he has this long paragraph about what should be in the world builder too. And then that follows up with a paragraph that says, I don't have time to do this right now. You wrote a really long paragraph in there. I don't think he ever stopped working, really. He was always kind of full steam ahead.
Mm-hmm.
His capacity to sit and work for 12-hour days or 10-hour days, then type for 10-hour days. What was his thing, though? If you can't crank out 5,000 words a day, you probably have no place in this business.
Something like that.
I've heard you say that before, I think. Something close to that.
Yeah. He told me that one time, and I was like, well, I'm good with 200.
Yeah. It's like, well, Gary, that's why I remain part-time.
Can I do 2,500 and just be part-time?
Right. He was also extremely blunt, but in a way that could be very funny too. So no writer is perfect. So if I submitted anything during the course of our collaborations and he thought it could be improved, he might say something very sensitive and subtle, like that's as useful as chicken shit on a pump handle or something like that. But it was easy with him not to take it personally because he was not an egoist. Like, he had a very assertive and strong personality, and he knew what he believed, but I don't feel that he was egotistical in the sense of like, I'm the best writer in the world and you must worship me. Like, I never got that vibe from him.
Mm.
No.
So he was open to like feedback from the other direction too.
He was more of a mentor too. Yeah. Like, he really, I think he was inspiring in many ways, and that's one of them. It was not that difficult to work with him.
Sure.
Yeah, I always found it a pleasure to work with Gary. Even when we would butt heads a little bit, it was never, yeah.
I think I heard either you said it to us or I saw it in the like intro video that we played before the stream, but you said two things about Gary that I remember. It was you learned from him a lot how to like treat people. And oh God, the second thing just like fled my mind.
Relatable.
God. Oh, my brain just like aborted it from my mind. I don't remember.
Upload.
But that made me think of like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. You should do it. That's very like Steve Chenault too.
I think there was about 5 or 6 instances where I was very close to him when he was interacting with situations, and he always handled them very, very, very well. And I think the one that stands out the absolute most is we had just started working. This is like probably Gen Con 2002, I think, is what this was, maybe 2001, whatever, doesn't matter. And he had come to the booth and he was signing stuff. We had nothing published of his at the point, so he was signing the little After Winter Dark thing, and we were giving it to people who wanted a signature. You can just take it, go. Here's the book. But this little girl, 8, 9 years old, she comes up to the booth and she's standing with her dad, and she's just terrified to meet him because her dad said, "This is Gary Gygaxian." She's got tears in her eyes, and his interaction with that child was astounding. I mean, he had her just relaxed and calm and signed the book. It was really cool to watch just how he treated just about everyone. Yeah. And I never saw this, but I know at least twice people showed up in Lake Geneva, didn't have a place to stay, and he said, "Well, come over, you can sleep on my couch." And I mean, these are complete strangers. So,
Wow.
he was pretty cool.
His door was always open. That was or at least his porch was always open. I mean, there's like
anyway. We spent a lot of time on that porch.
Yeah.
Man, that's really great to hear about, because I know that nowadays I have a personal stake in this a little bit. Like we're now starting to hear more and more about like people who are prominent in the tabletop RPG space being welcomed to like young girls. Yeah. And I'm glad to see that like that was something that mattered to him.
It did, and I know it circulated for a very short period a couple years ago that he was misogynist or something, and he certainly, like Dan said, he had his belief systems, but he in no way, shape, or form thought women shouldn't be role playing or any of that stuff. I mean, that was
sure.
His comment was actually geared towards some marketing they did back in the 70s and the early 80s. And there weren't many women playing. I couldn't get any of my girlfriends to play D&D. It sucked. I don't want to play it.
No, and he came from a wargaming background, which was almost exclusively male back in that day.
Yeah.
When you're talking the 50s, 60s, 70s. And I played war games regularly into the early 90s. And I could... Yes, and none of my girlfriends were ever interested in it. They just made fun of me for doing it,
and for every like one person that was like, welcoming and proactive about being like, yes, join us.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were, 50 others that were like, no.
Yeah, there certainly was there was definitely blowback, especially as once the hobby kind of got entrenched in the 80s. And it kind of dips with second edition and whatnot. There was definitely some blowback, women can't play or whatever craziness,
Yeah. We would have started that crap.
We're coming for your games. We're going to make them as girly as possible. We're going to throw glitter all over them.
I will toot TLG's horn. Back when we started in 2000, we had a zine. What are those called?
Zines.
Called The Seeker. And we had a column in there called Women in Gaming. We did that way back before, before the modern age of whatever we're doing now with this technology and
Steve,
AI or whatever is going on.
you've had about 15 Dr. Peppers bought for you, so.
Holy shit! I'll just drink the one then.
But that's like $50 now.
It's like 3 collapses of my pancreas.
Right.
And Lion Dove GM, thank you for the follow. Thank you for the bits. We appreciate you. You are absolutely lovely. We had another question in here. How do you think Gary would embrace the digital? I've got other questions about the actual World Builder series, but
That's fine.
just while we're on the subject.
I do want to say something to the troll crew. We've started focusing on the World Builder books, but we need to focus on Gary Gygax too. So this is great. Grace.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've got other questions here. Like, I want to know the full extent of like why Trollord Games and Gary Gygax are so enmeshed. I want to know what the history is. But for now, Patadin is asking, how do you think Gary would embrace the digital world or online gaming?
Oh, he would have embraced it. He showed me a video game script that he wrote back in 1979, or 70, or maybe 80, something like that. What was that first thing? Pong or whatever that first thing was.
I can't remember. Pong, yeah, Pong.
As soon as that hit, he began thinking, this is, video games is going to be the future for RPGs. So he started thinking that line. And I think that I remember when they started selling PDFs, and I've told this story many times. Gary and I had the exact same response. Like, nobody's ever going to read a PDF. We're not doing any of that. That's crazy. Well, I was wrong. And Gary's big concern on that. He figured people would start reading digitally, but he was afraid that it would get out there into the wild. He couldn't control, who had it and who was using it or whatever, and he wouldn't get paid for it. We lost Dan again, but we talked to him. It didn't take hardly any convincing to get him. I was actually, some of those emails I read today, he didn't have any problem with PDF. So I guarantee you, with the modern age, he would have embraced everything that was coming. He really wasn't, I was talking to one of the bankers this morning, and I told her that one of the TLG works with, I decided about 6 months ago, I'm not going to learn anything new. So my future is going to be rough. I'm done with this. But Gary was not like that at all. He was all over innovation, new.
Yeah. I mean, he was the TV show his idea. I think I heard something about him making a video game. I don't know if that's true.
He didn't. Well, so there was a few things. He did some voice work for a video game, and then he and I and his company, Troller Games, and his company, Trigen, and another company, signed a contract to do. What are those? I can't remember the multi-online
MMO.
Massive multi.
Yeah, MMOs.
Yes, MMOs.
Thing. See, I've just quit. I just summed them out. But and these guys started working on it. It never came to fruition, but they were going to take Castle Zagging and turn it into that whole kind of thing. So he certainly was looking in that direction. There's no doubt.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think my opinion is we're about to go through another radical change within 2 to 3 years.
Oh yeah, it's already here.
It's here, but it's not reached the point where it's like it can work, but they're working on it, and we've got 2 to 3 years, a short time frame before it changes again.
What do you think it's going to be?
Augmented reality, AI, and look up.
I agree.
Yeah.
What's the program? I think it's not Google. It's Soro.
It's that. You guys have seen it. Jeremy sent that. Everyone knows who it is. It's that company that made the videos of the little puppy dogs.
I sent it over last week after going and reviewing their thing. I can't remember. Sora. That's it. Sora. So, and they won't let. I guess.
Yes, Wolf alone.
It's invite only or whatever, but that literally is going to change the landscape again.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether we want it or like it.
No, it doesn't matter. It's there. And I'll say this too, though. So I'm not going to say it at all. Never mind. Move on.
Back to Gary Gygax.
That stuff is freaky.
Yeah. No, it'll turn into a discussion that I don't want to have.
One of these days, we're going to have a stream, maybe during our subathon, when we do our crazy long stream, we'll do a the Chenault brothers try World of Warcraft or like
Oh yes,
an
I love World
MMO.
of Warcraft. Oh,
Dude.
Keep Online. Yes.
I
Hey,
love World of
we
Warcraft.
might be able
You
to talk.
played?
We might be able to talk Steve into playing
Sorry.
some Red Dead. Get on his horse,
Yes.
his rifle.
That
Yes.
is a great game.
So I played Grace. Everyone out there will appreciate this. I played Red Dead Redemption once for hours and hours. And Pete, my son, walked by and he watched. I was riding my horse.
Yeah.
And he walks by and I'm still riding my horse. And like an hour later, walks by and I'm still riding my horse. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just riding my horse."
That's the thing though. Like the most fun thing to do in Red Dead is just role play being this like cowboy outlaw guy.
Yeah.
The world
didn't-
is like alive enough that it kind of feels like you can get
I didn't do
into
any
it.
of that. I just rode my horse. If I saw people, I
Yeah.
rode the other way.
Humans.
Well, it's beautiful. Hey, welcome back, Dan.
Welcome back, Dan.
Dan is back.
We should have like a World of Warcraft
Those
group
days.
play one time. That would be
Yes.
so freaking awesome.
Troll Lord Games Guild.
Ooh.
Let's go. We all play trolls.
Oh, that would be cool, actually.
Yeah.
So
that would
fun.
be very cool.
I had Gurch. That was my character, a troll.
Oh shit.
Yes, no, it's my favorite character I ever played in World of Warcraft. Now I started on World of Warcraft Classic, right? So
Yeah.
no, I started way before that. Can't remember when the little guys were running
Oh,
around.
yeah, you did.
The
And
little
the
armies.
you built villages. You started with a guy and you build a little hut and another hut and start farming. The orcs would show up, kill you, and then you build
Yeah.
another hut.
What was that other game that I was stuck on in that time period? This is when we first started TLG, and I was playing this game.
Pong.
That was Baldur's Gate or something.
No, it was all like math, right? So
Right.
there's no like armies moving around. And
But hey,
you built
but
your.
I think it was the Gygaxian Fantasy World.
Oh yeah, no, that's what. Sorry,
Right. Sorry.
it wasn't.
We'll get
Okay,
into
it wasn't Settlers, but we're talking about. Oh my god, I'm going to look it up.
Civilization?
Gygaxian Fantasy World, so I'll do some research.
Maybe like Civilization.
It was sort of like Civilization, but it's
Okay.
armies. It was a German company who ran it.
I remember what you're talking about.
I've got two things.
All
So
right, fire away.
the first is a statement. The second is a question from chat. I played World of Warcraft for like 11 years old through like 18 years old and wrote 3 little novellas about my World of Warcraft character, which have died with my old laptops.
Oh, that's
Question from Cannibal. You mentioned that there was an uncompleted Seafarers book meant to be part of the Gygaxian fantasy series. Is this part, or there was an uncompleted Seafarers book? Is that part of the Gygaxian fantasy worlds books?
yes.
And
it
I
is.
guess, do we have plans?
Well, to let everybody know, Dan, we've brought Dan on board to manage 2 of the Gary Gygax properties. One is the Gygaxian Fantasy Worlds, and the other one is Castle Zagging. So Dan has sent me 2 very detailed reports of where we are on those things. I've not read them, but I will get to them probably this evening. So Dan, on that Seafarers book, I think Don McAvite was working on that, or has he brought that up yet?
He has brought it up and he has the documents. And there was some questions concerning authorship where there was, as I said, Gary was very much in the spirit of camaraderie and collaboration. So there was a lot of people involved. So that's something that I've actually mentioned. You'll see in the report.
But you'll have to read it to know.
Not
We'll
heavy,
get there.
not heavy seas though. No fear. But yes, I think that material won't be something that we have to dig up out of Egypt or something.
That's good. So that one will be. So what we're going to do is restrict stuff that we know that Gary was involved with. So we're not going to continue this series on with stuff that he wasn't involved with, but we know he was involved with this. So that one, it will probably be part of it. We've got 3 finished. If we can get a hold of Zane McCarty, I think was his name. We're still kind of poking about. Did you get a hold of him, Dan, or any luck on that?
No luck on that one.
Yeah. So we'll see. But the Seafarers book probably will be part of the series.
I've got some bounty hunters out there right now.
Excellent.
You see
Hanging out with
Boba Fett at
Godard.
your door, you know why.
it is funny. I've got all of the text, and I think it was edited. I'm not 100% certain, but I think it was edited. So it was deep in it. Do what, Chuck? What are you waving about?
Oh, I was pointing at Grace, actually. I was trying to be subtle about it so you wouldn't interrupt yourself, but you did. So continue.
Shit.
It's fine.
Oops.
Yeah,
Nice.
I'm trying to catch up
Sorry.
to speed too, because there's a whole lot of material, and some of it, of course, obviously I was familiar with, but a lot of materials to be pulled from myriad sources. And after 15 to 17 years, definitely a process for me to catch up with the material myself and familiarize myself with everyone that was involved, peripheral to my own central projects. So
And it's
that's
a lot
a
of people.
fascinating dive. Yes.
This is why I didn't want to do it.
Oh, I learned a lot from Game of Thrones and those birds, you know.
But you really you worked very closely with Gary. You also worked on the Gigsburg stuff, so I mean, you kind of knew his pace. You knew what he wanted and whatnot. Really, on my end, you know, Davis and I were the publishers. We published what Gary sent us. I don't think we rejected any manuscripts or anything like that. We would put it in the queue, however we, you know, whatever we were doing. But you worked with Gary quite a bit.
There's no doubt that Trollord Games holds the torch for the Gygaxian style, as he said it himself. And he said that Castles and Crusades was the closest iteration to what he would have envisioned had there been a second edition under his own direction.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know
So the Castles and Crusades and that whole direction, I think he felt that your material and your vision meshed really well with his own feeling on what was to him entertaining and good. I don't say best, because he definitely had room for other ideas and genres and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, he loved you guys.
Oh, speaking of, so there are two things. Okay, so to Dan's point, today was a really good day for me, so I'll quit working.
Sick.
No. Okay, so so some documents have recently been released. I guess someone went to the court in Wisconsin or whatever and has what's been sealed, the Arneson Gygax case in 1979.
Oh, I didn't know any of this has happened.
Yeah, and it's been released. I don't know when it was released. I found out about it today. Maybe it was released last week. I don't know. Most of the comments seem to be
It's released 37 years ago.
So there's a big discussion, but what it has in it, I do believe. Now, I didn't go through the whole 921 pages, but I did read through the comments and looked at some of the images, some of the pages. What it has is some of the earliest renditions of the game, early renditions of the game before any of it saw publication, I think. Right? So the talk and whatever. Anyway, so you have there's a page in there, and I'm reading through these documents, looking at these early renditions and ideas about the game, and I found it. Okay, so when I was designing Castles and Crusades, okay, remember the first manuscript you rejected out of hand, and Gary was like, "This isn't workable." You know, everyone was like, "No," and then I went back to the drawing board, and I was like, and that's where it's like, okay. I pulled out all the D&D books and looked at all the charts and looked at everything, went over all this stuff and started breaking down the math. And I found a magic formula. There's a formula. I found that it's not the formula, but it's the base of the formula in those early documents. So that formula stays consistent throughout the entirety of the game. And I managed to pick it out of all those texts and stuff, and boom, dropped it into Castles and Crusades, and there you have it.
Validation.
Do what?
Validation.
It was validation, and that's, I think, why when you, to your point, Gary said Castles and Crusades Trollord Games was it, is because he saw that same thing. Because I specifically remember you were looking at those emails today, and it was like there was a CC to Gary on the rules or something.
Yes. Yeah.
So I recall one conversation. He just flat out said that's not going to work. It was straight up. That's not going to work, Davis. Just like do this simple thing here, and you'll see that that's not going to work. I'm like, okay, you're right. And that's part of the thing, going back to the drawing board. And that was basically how Gary run it. And worked with me on those rules because he didn't actually. He just told me when things wouldn't work.
Right. His whole thing was if it wasn't enough like he needed it to be or wanted it to be, then we had to change it off of that. He didn't design any of it. You and Matt Golden designed Castles and Crusaders.
Yeah, but if he saw a problem with it, if he saw two, he was looking for two specific problems. One, he couldn't work with it, but two, if the mechanic wouldn't work, right? Because he had been in gaming long enough and designed games long enough to know when a mechanic ultimately would fail, right? He would see the fail point in the future. So he would write me and say that, basically that's a fail point. You got a fail point in the future. And I remember that happened on the Knight and the Paladin when I wrote those because.
Hey, Davis.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, but this is a discussion of Gary Gygax and the Gygaxian Fantasy World Series.
Oh, yeah. So, anyway,
that's for tomorrow morning.
Anyway, all right, back to the Gygaxian Fantasy World Series. Oh, and in Living Fantasy, you were talking about that 320 acres?
Yes, that was a funny email where he found his acreage was off. He should have doubled it and stayed at 180 or just supposed to be 360.
Okay, wait. So we're going to have to diverge for one more minute. Speaking of Living Fantasy and 320 acres, the game that I'm thinking about, it's a browser-based game.
Look, Dan just quit because he's tired of talking.
Yeah, he got pissed off. The hell with you, Davis.
Oh, wait. Someone out there has to know.
Way to steal the spotlight. Great.
Yeah. Early 2000s. Hex-based game. It's online. People around the world are playing. What you do is you pick a hex you start in, or it's randomly assigned. A hex you start in, you pick a tribe, and you're joining this tribe, and you get a little village, and then you have to start leveling up your village, but you level it up by conquering like other places and setting up other villages. And what you eventually do is form teams of people with all of your villages, and you work together to defeat other teams of villages.
Sounds like some crazy communism or something. I'm not sure.
Look what Dan has left us with here. Do you realize this was all a trap? You realize that, right?
Okay, so anyway, all right, I'm done. I'm done with my thing today.
Well,
Cartman
I've got more questions. I do want to wait
Village
until Dan gets back.
Well, I tell you what, Grace,
Yeah,
along with
plan.
what you wanted to ask about, I do have a question that I have never asked Steve or Davis.
Let's
Never
see.
asked him this. I've been here 6 years. I've never asked him this. I know you will love this question. Did you ever get to experience much gaming with Gary?
So, me, no. And the reason that was, I had a pretty strict policy when we were when we started doing conventions. First off, when we first met him, it was in and around Gen Con. So we were up there for Gen Con and that. And I think it was maybe the second year that we actually went to his house and had dinner and all of that stuff. But it was when Game Fest occurred, which was after Gen Con moved to Indianapolis. There was Game Fest, and we actually visited him with him much more. We'd show up early, we'd go out to dinner before the con, and then after the con, and then be at his house during the con and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But it really wasn't until we did the two conventions up there, Winter Dark and the Lake Geneva Gaming Con, that we got to spend a lot of time with Gary. However, I had a policy. Anyone working for Troll Lord Games, because we were up there all the time, could not sit in a chair with Gary so long as there was any attendee up there that wanted to game with Gary, because we could game with him anytime, right? Right. So I think Mark, Sandy, and myself never, because Mark was at all of those conventions. He doesn't work with us anymore, but in those days he was an integral part of the company. He and I never actually got to game with Gary because of that stupid ass policy I had. I think I know Davis played one weird ass Egyptian board game with him at some point, some ancient thing. I don't know.
That's awesome.
We played several games.
Yeah. So no, I never got to play with him.
Yeah, I enjoyed playing with Gary, but he was that entire crew: Gary, Tom Wham, Ernie Gygax, that entire crew up there were really hyper competitive.
Oh yeah,
hyper competitive gamers. To the point where I was like, outsmarted me. I've never said it because I'm not that.
It was, it's different when you look at the way they played role-playing games in the 1970s to today. Today we talk about collaborative play and storytelling and all of that. It was more about you got to defeat the DM, and the DM's going to defeat you.
Yes, that was a big thing in the early days. It was a big common thing.
Yeah, so it
That's
was
so foreign now.
I know it's very. It's
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
foreign to me, and I played in those days.
I
'cause-
wouldn't play a game like that.
Yeah,
Th-
so
I don't know
David
if that's a
started-
generational
Grace,
thing.
what you do is you do like me, and have a coup, and you take over, and then you kill his character, and then you win.
Perfect. There we go.
You win. That's how
I-
you win at the game.
That's right.
But even when Davis and I started playing in '76 or whatever year that was, probably within a year or so, it quickly divulged into more. We started developing stories into this stuff. It was very very quick. And if I were to be a betting man, it kind of did that for them as well. But watching like David said, the old crew play, it was funny. They were crazy competitive. They were they were nuts.
Well, I've got a question. Just while we're waiting for Dan to get back here, like we've kind of talked around it a little bit, but like, what is the history between Gary Gygax and TLG?
How it got started, or
Yeah, yeah. What's the history there?
this is it's one of those just someone said it the other day in that interview Davis and I were in. I can't remember what it was, but so Mac Golden, we go to Gen Con in 2000. Company forms in '99, and we go to Gen Con in the year 2000. And Mac was a huge. Mac was an absolutely monstrous fan of Gary Gygax's, and he took the 3 adventures that we did and the aired world setting and the map. And he took it to Gary's booth where he was with the company called Heckaforge. So Mac went over, stood in line, got Gary to sign some things, and then he gave him these adventures and said, "Hey, we're a publisher over here. I just want to give you these. We love your work. We appreciate all you've done. Blah blah blah." I never knew that happened. About a month after that or so, Mac and I were talking about, because we got picked up by distributors at that Gen Con, and suddenly we were selling a lot of books that we didn't have. And the distributors were asking for our publication schedule, and we didn't have a publication schedule. we didn't have any of this. So we were scrambling to put all this together. And Maggie's like, "Well, why don't you contact Gary Gygax and see if we could publish some of his material?" And of course, I was like, "Why would Gary Gygax go with Troller Games? That's whatever." He said, "Just do it." So, and then he told me about the books that he had given him. So that was the kind of the opening. I sent him a letter and said, "Hey, my partner gave you some books. Hope you enjoyed them. We appreciate everything you've done, blah, blah, blah." He wrote back almost immediately. Probably within an hour or 2 hours, I got an email back from him. He read the books. He really enjoyed them. He thought they were this, then that, and that, and the other. And because I had mentioned in the email something about publishing or somewhere in this conversation. But as soon as I mentioned that, he said, I asked him, "Would you like to do some adventures? We'd love to publish some of your work." And he said, "Absolutely not. I don't like writing adventures, but I have these books that I would like to pitch to you." And the first one was The Canting Crew, and just this open-ended series. So we got on the phone probably that day or maybe the next day, started chatting and had a good hour and a half long phone conversation, which mostly was about history. He's a huge history buff. Of course, I was working on my PhD at the time.
And was you and Davis?
No, this was just me and Gary.
Okay, gotcha.
At this time, so I was the only full-time employee of TLG. Davis was doing digs out. He was an archaeologist out in the West doing digs, and Mac
That's
was
so cool.
Yeah, Mac was either in law school or just started working as a lawyer.
I think he just started working as a lawyer downtown.
Yeah, something like that. So I was the only one full-time that could do stuff, during the day. So it was just me and Gary, and we ended up just chatting about history mostly. And then we switched to email, and within 2 weeks of Mac saying, "Hey, why don't you get a hold of Gary? We're signing contracts for the Lost City of Gaxmore with his sons, and then the Gygaxian Fantasy Worlds." And I can't remember what the first. There was the adventure that appeared in Air, but there's something else. There's a third thing in those early days that we were working on. And then suddenly we're working with Gary Gygax 6 months after we debuted or whatever it was. It was weird. It was weird.
Wow. So this series was the first thing, really, that you guys all worked on together.
Yes, the very first thing that we did, he did this very short 3-page adventure that went in the Codex of Erd. And then the next thing we did was the Canting Crew, which was interesting because I remember when it released at Origins, whatever year. And I remember one of the distributors came up to us, and he was one of the ones that had picked us up the previous year, and he couldn't quite remember everything, but he said the first thing he saw was Gary Gygax's Canting Crew in one of those pop-up displays. And he walked up and he said, "Oh, you're dead. You're out of business. No one will buy Gary Gygax." Like,
Wow.
well, we've already sold several thousands of copies of this book, but okay. And the ironic thing is, it was through your distribution company, but but carry on. That's not true, actually. It was Aldo. Aldo actually, that's right, because we fired him shortly thereafter and went with Impressions. Because Aldo used another interesting little thing. Aldo used the revenue from the Canting Crew to start his company called Impressions, which was a consolidator, which eventually brought everybody. Damn it! What is that gigantic war game that came out about 4 years ago? Gloomhaven. Is that it? Is that? It was huge.
It was huge. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Impressions brings us Gloomhaven. Brings that to the market. So there you go.
Yeah.
Here's
Cool.
my rambling story, Grace.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a hell of a story.
Here's a funny addendum to all that. Okay, so that first con where we met Gary, that was the first convention we had where we met Gary, right?
It was the second Gen Con where we met him. Yeah.
Okay, the second Gen Con. So now, and this is how like blissfully unaware I am of the world around me. Okay, so I would go on these smoke breaks, right? And I'd go out back to the deck or to the loading dock and sit there with this group of guys and start jibber jabbering. Okay. So, and it was all, whatever. Anyways, a lot of guys out there all the time. And we would just sit there and jibber jabber and jibber jabber and jibber jabber about history and stuff. So much so that I was really looking forward to my smoke breaks. So I could go out there and talk history, philosophy, and all kinds of stuff. Because we never talked gaming. We always talked history and philosophy. Well, apparently one of the people I was talking to that whole time for that whole convention was Gary. Okay. And I was completely unaware I was talking to Gary because no one ever asked any names because people were just coming and going, right? And Gary was sitting out there talking and, he would, offer his opinions on this. And Gary and I got along because we had the same sort of like political philosophy about something. But we talk about history, and I can't remember who else was. I remember the face of this one guy, but I cannot remember. I've not seen him in 10 years. But anyway, then he came to the booth, and that was after Mac brought him the stuff, and he came back to the booth, right? To visit.
So the first Gen Con 2000 is where Mac brought him the books.
Okay.
The second Gen Con 2001 is where we met him.
That's okay.
Walking with him, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, when he first came to the booth again, I just have been talking to him out in the thing, right? So I had no idea who he was. Okay. And he came up and he introduced himself, but not saying anything because I've been talking to him the whole time. And then he's like, "So what have you got here?" He never said his name. And I was like, yada, 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 going on our spiel, and all this kind of stuff, inspired by Gary Gygax. And there's either you or Kent was standing behind him, or you and Mac standing behind him going and mouthing to me, "That's Gary. That's Gary." And I was like, what the hell? And
be cool. Be fucking cool.
I know. I didn't catch on to what they were saying until after Gary left. And then someone actually came up to me. You were talking to Gary Gygax. And I was like, what the fuck? But that's how inviting and humble, it was.
So Grace, you said you had questions for Dan. You were waiting for Dan to get back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me take a look here. It looks like maybe Dan's camera is frozen again. Unless not.
Well, we tried.
Oh, man, I'm so sorry.
Well, his wife's watching the stream, so there's that.
Well,
we will get Dan back on, certainly, so that we can.
Yeah, because he's filled with knowledge.
Do this again.
All kinds of it.
Yeah, well, and he's an integral part of what's coming. I can't stress enough that he's going to be managing and it's a lot of material and it's a lot of people. It's one reason that I, in the midst of all the projects that we've got ongoing, that I didn't feel like me or Chuck or anyone could take this on, and Dan was perfectly set for it. So right. The role he's fixing to play and has already begun to play, and I got to tell you, I haven't read those reports. They are detailed, which is why I haven't read them. If he had just wrote everything's fine, I'd have been good.
Well, I can tell he's attentive.
If we didn't.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say I could tell he's very attentive to detail. He's smart.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Super smart.
That was going to be my next question if we didn't get him like back in stream. Like we've talked a lot about what it was like to work with Gary, but what is it like to work with Dan again?
So
Oh,
Dan is
yeah.
one of the nicest people I have ever met,
Yeah.
and he was ridiculously easy to work with back in the early days. He and his wife would show up at Gen Con and we'd chat and whatnot. We never got a lot of time to spend a lot of time together because we were ridiculously busy. But Dan has always been a pleasure to work with. He's got the same humor that Gary does. He loves puns and jokes, which of course 80% of them go past me. So I don't get it, but I rely on other people for that, or
Sure.
my cues to laugh. But working with Dan has always been easy, and that's when Davis and I were talking once when the contracts, the court had cleared everything, whatever. Dan's was the very first name that popped up between Davis and I.
There is no doubt you
Yeah.
made the right choice on that deal. To manage all that
Yeah.
whole gang of people, you kidding me? Fantastic.
And it all escapes me now because my brain is extraordinarily porous. It's like a block of cheese. But Dan has his own company and his own role playing game, and he's done a couple of Kickstarters on them. It does very well, and I can't remember now the role playing game that he's got out there, but. Dan seems pretty chill, even frozen. Yeah. Yeah. So he's just got a world of experience about RPG design and
Eldritch.
writing and all of that stuff.
I couldn't remember. It's Eldritch RPG. That's it. I cannot remember.
Eldritch RPG.
Gotcha.
Dan was the very first name that popped up to my mouth as soon as Kent said that things were going. We got to get Dan back on board.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
awesome.
really glad that he's back on board.
And now not just in a writing capacity, but like in a managing capacity. He's what, managing or overseeing really?
Yes. So he's overseeing mainly the GFW series, but the Castle Zagged, Yigsburg, and Eastmark Folio stuff. And then beyond. So, and Dan can speak to this better than I can, but
welcome back.
There he is. He's back.
I plugged my camera into a different port. I'm thinking maybe it was. Oh, never mind.
Hopefully it works. So there's a lot of writers that were working on the neighborhoods in Yigsburg for Gary, and different writers working on the Gygaxian Fantasy World books for Gary. And Dan is going to be the managing all of that content.
He's a project manager basically over all those projects, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he's
awesome. Back. And Dan, like as a writer of the series, if you're not still fiddling with electronics, because I know it's impossible to answer questions and also troubleshoot at the same time. So I don't want
to. Hey, answer me.
It's a troll lord world.
Yes, it is. That needs to be on a bumper sticker somewhere.
There we go. So
can you hear us, Dan?
I think I'll be okay now. Yeah, so much for hubs.
Well, let's immediately put you on the spot after technical issues because people love that.
The answer is yes, and it's not my fault.
Well, shit, I'll write that one off. Perfect. Like as the writer of Insidiae,
Session 10.
What's your hope for that book? Like, what do you think is the ideal application of it? What do you hope for it? Who do you hope uses it?
Well, I can tell you, when I first approached writing a book like that, I was concerned about the fact that there had been so many good books written about writing adventures in the first place.
Yeah.
And one of my great challenges was, how on earth am I going to write a book that takes an approach that's at once useful but different than general books of advice that I had read? Because I didn't want to write a book supposing that those who read it didn't already know how to write a good adventure.
Right.
And I didn't want to gear it toward only professionals or what have you. So the way I approached it was more from the standpoint of a skeletal structure that could be useful to keep in mind. And somewhat similar to how the world builder was thematically put together, so that if for example, in the World Builder, if you wanted to start writing about a description of the town, I wanted ready at hand all the different kind of building materials you might want to consider, or cultural influences, things like that. And you could just page through and start to envision things yourself. And I took a similar tact with Insidiae, with the Book of Plots. Basically, that was originally what it was called, the Book of Plots.
Wow.
And so I took
a good title.
I kind of like Insidiae, it's like I said in the beginning here, I described it to my wife at the time as it felt like I was bleeding through my fingertips trying to write that thing, because I had 4 months to do 80,000 words.
Jeez.
And am I allowed to swear on this, by the way?
Hell yeah.
No, absolutely fucking not. Do not even.
No,
fucking think about
absolutely.
it.
Jay, because my wife at the time dubbed the project "that fucking book."
I have heard that story before, Dan. I have heard that before somewhere.
Did you?
That is the title
Yeah.
of a very different book.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. And I was like, no, I'm not writing the Kama Sutra. But the way it's set up then is to start from a top-down approach, where you have the campaign details, and then you have the different archetypes and tropes that you might want to throw in. And so it's at first an organizational tool, is you're sitting down and you're brainstorming. That's what I wanted to do. Not presuming to teach people, but to give them a tool to use what they already were inclined to do through the huge amount of information over 40, 50 years that has been available to game masters. So it was kind of like a best of. But then I put together a template that, I originally was inspired by one of the AD&D products, and I forget who wrote it now. I don't know if it was Aaron Alston, who is the late Aaron Alston, who also wrote the D&D Encyclopedia. And I remember someone once said that man was like biologically engineered to write rules. But there was an adventure construction kit that I loved from the AD&D days.
I remember that.
I was inspired by that too, because it had all kinds of cool forms. And I remember when I was younger, much younger, just absolutely loving that. So I thought, well, I'd love to provide a framework and something to organize thoughts and use as a springboard for brainstorming and things like that. So yeah, that's how I envision it. And that's how I hope that it be used as a supplement to your own imagination, not telling you how to do it or what to do, but something that also goes hand in hand with the other books in the series.
I love that answer. I think that is really like, so I've known a lot of like writers and creative people that like hesitate to use like resources like the World Builder series because they don't want to be like told how to do the thing.
Right.
But like the only useful resources that I've ever used are ones exactly like what you described, where it provides a scaffolding that you can then like this isn't going to teach you how to like build a human man. This is going to give you the skeleton, and then you can build whatever type of humanoid you want on top of it.
Yes.
Does that metaphor make sense?
That makes perfect.
It does.
Yeah.
Yes,
Now I'm thinking of the Bionic Man now, and my mind is wandering off into cybernetics and things. But yeah, that does make sense. And it's ironic that someone wouldn't want to use the Gygaxian Fantasy World series because they wouldn't want to be reading that and then feeling like there was some sort of one true way prescribed.
Yeah, like a formula.
Right. It's like, no, I mean, I guess somewhat late medieval, early Renaissance assumptions made, but that was kind of D&D. So that's sort of where he gravitated. And he had his own distinctive style, but I don't know if what made, and Stephen, maybe you could speak to that. I don't know if what made his style distinctive was necessarily the milieu, the genre itself. Like, I mean, there was a fascinating history on how the cosmos and the prime material plane and all of that came to be through the history of D&D in general. And some of the surprising facts, like he wasn't a fan of Lord of the Rings, which I definitely am.
Interesting.
So it's interesting that he was a fan of the pulp fiction and Conan much more so than he was of Tolkien and the things that people more closely associate with the tropes of D&D. So it's kind of ironic
That's
too, then, that
interesting.
they don't want to be influenced by the Gygaxian vision, because his was actually quite different than what someone might assume, and probably was reflected differently in his own home games.
I
Right.
often point people who are getting into fantasy or sci-fi to the earlier decades, because as soon as Tolkien takes root in our collective subconscious, and I remember this happened when I was reading so voraciously so much fantasy in the 80s, in the early 80s and the 70s, you get tons and tons of fantasy novels and science fiction novels that are it's just a story. There's no tropes yet, and then you go on. They're done. But by the early 90s, everything was shifting to trilogies. You could hardly buy a set of books. It wasn't a trilogy or something more. And it was becoming built around this kind of model that Tolkien didn't intend to establish, but the popularity of his works drove publishers in that direction. So if you read stuff like Gary wrote, or what Gary read back from the 30s and the 20s, it is some weird fantasy stuff, things you wouldn't think about, from directions that you don't think about. And I guarantee you, when you look at the Gygaxian prose and the stuff that goes into books like these Gygaxian Fantasy World Series and his vision of the way RPGs unfolded, as a lot of that comes from these books that were just different. Then there's no tropes, not yet. And there's a lot of validity comes out of any genre, whether it's of entertainment, whether it's movies or comic books or whatever. Once the tropes are there, it's not that good. It can be still clever, but for the most part, it's kind of rehashing and reskinning stuff over and over again. And I think when you're reading Gary, you get away from that quite a bit.
Yeah, it seems like it's much more technical instead of like, here's lore on elves, even though that might, I don't know if that's in there, but like,
Yeah.
it's more just, here's what goes into a culture.
Right.
Do with that what you will.
That's exactly right, Grace, and that is the perfect point of it, because you can look at as RPGs, and Davis. I didn't buy much, but Davis bought everything that came out on RPGs, and you can watch the development of anything from orcs to elves to weapons to mechanics of games. In the early days, it wasn't that much focus on the goblin has to be this, or the orc has to be that, or the dwarf has to be that. It was, okay, here's the idea of a dwarf. They're stocky people with beards. Go. But fast forward 40 years, I've got 14 books of lore. No, dwarves all have a Scottish brogue. They all whatever
they live in the mountains and don't like to swim.
They play the bagpipes.
I don't know. I'm so tired of Scottish brogues. I'm so tired of it.
In Terminus, our homebrew world, dwarves are more reminiscent of like an Egyptian sort of culture. We're super proud of it. But that was Nick's idea. But
or you can go with the original, it's not even original, but the old German conception of dwarves, these little bitty guys down in the hole in the ground. I don't know, they're very evil.
Anything but the Scots. I love the Scots, and it's a crazy language, and it's a beautiful country, but dwarves don't have to be Scottish.
Yeah, like they make so much sense. Like if you think about the pyramids, like the artistry, the geometry of it, like the craftsmanship of the Egyptian culture, like it makes so much sense for dwarves who are so like physical and like love to craft things.
I think you
that does make sense.
I think you mean to say alien dwarves.
Right, sorry, I forgot our alien overlords.
You had to put that in there, didn't you? I had to get that in.
Right, sorry. We do have some questions.
We got to wrap it up soon. Let's fire these questions off and
before I disappear again.
Yeah, right. Will we get the same great cover art on the re-releases of the World Builders, just with like an updated TLG logo and no D20 logo, or will we have new covers?
So the short answer, and my dad was very fond of saying no is a complete sentence. The short answer is no, and I will say that those three covers are some of my favorite. The first three are some of my favorite covers that TLG has ever done. Period. But I can't find the contracts on those, so I'm assuming that I don't. We did a lot of work for hire back in those days, but some people's work that we hired, it was one-time use. So on the off chance that was one-time use, we're not going to use them again. So,
And I think that'll be exciting to release them with like a brand new, beautiful cover. The Canton Crew, if I remember correctly, is like a different size than the rest of the books as
yes,
well. They'll all be like uniform, beautiful, like that'll be
yes,
exciting.
it will all be the same. The Canning Crew is done at a Canadian printer.
Yes.
Now, actually, the first printing of the World Builder was also done at the Canadian printer. So if you have a short World Builder, a first printer, that should be short, but the second printing was done in an American printer. I don't do the metric well. Now I leave this up to Chuck if he wants to put it in here. I don't even think Grace has seen this yet, but we have the mock-up.
We do.
It's just a mock-up for what the covers are going to look like. We will throw this in the stream, and the concept that you're going to see is an archway, and Jason Walton is doing these. The material on the outside of the arch will change, and the material on the inside of the arch will change, but the arch will be universal for all 7 to 10, 11 volumes that we're going to do. So we can drop that. We can show that here for the first time.
And
I
then
like the
after that,
puzzle
we have
pieces of the World Builder. As an autistic person, that was cool.
it's just satisfying.
I love that
Yes.
cover. I really love that cover. I mean, it is. I thought, and the Canton Crew too. Those two just were spot on.
And
Just
speaking of revealing things for the first time,
do you want me to do it, or do you want?
I mean, I think you should do the honors.
You
All
want me
right,
to,
I'll
you
do
want
it.
me
So-
you want me to show this picture first or not?
Get the picture up there, and then
Yeah.
and I'll explain what's coming in the Kickstarter. So for those people who sign up or who back the Kickstarter early and remain backers throughout the whole the duration of the Kickstarter, we're going to have everyone's going to get a free PDF of the original publications as they came out over the years. Some of those we're going to have to piece together because they were never made into PDFs that I know of. But also, your name will be entered into a raffle. I believe we're going to do 5 of these. Chuck is determined. And we've got some Gary Gygax's Castle Zaggig, the Gazetteer Folio, actually signed by Gary Gygax.
Signed by Gary.
He
Signed
get one.
and numbered.
Yes. He pre-signed a few of these, and Wilson found them in the warehouse the other day. And they are numbered as well. There's only 300 of these done.
Originally, right?
Man, I would have to dig out sales reports to see what was sold and what wasn't, but they're relatively rare. So we will be giving away, or your name will be entered into a raffle. Chuck or Grace will pull your name out of the raffle.
And you have to back it fully to the end. You can't just pull out.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
Or even afterwards, you gotta get your Gygaxian Fantasy World book.
We'll know.
So please go sign up for the Kickstarter if you haven't already, so you'll get that notification because it'll be for the first, I think, Chuck, you said 48 hours. The first 48 hours that people back and put in a pledge, your name will be entered into it. So
If you sign up at the 49th hour, no dice.
no dice.
To tag
Sign
in
up
with
for the
that.
notification. Get
Repeating that
notified.
And for y'all that have asked a couple times tonight, the Kickstarter will be launching on the 11th of March. So get followed.
Yeah.
Get backed.
Yes, please. All right, so there's the thing. I mean, you had a couple more questions we want to throw out before we let Dan go. And Dan, we hope to get you on again in the near future if we can.
Yes, please.
It just occurred to me that I should have been wearing a Castles and Crusades t-shirt, and I don't have one.
No,
You're good.
we'll take care of that. I got to get with you after the show, actually, and tell you about something.
Gotcha.
Thank
Is there
you.
any
Now I'm
idea-
That's good. We see the transition. You've got the Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
and Gary transitioned that to Castles and Crusades, and Chuck's got the CNC shirt on, so it worked beautifully.
This is all I wear now. This is the only clothes I have, actually. I've got 15 of these. Joking.
Symmetry.
One last question for now. Do we know what the Kickstarter or the MSRP is going to be for the new box set? Like any idea on price? What I can say as a disclaimer is you can build, like you don't have to purchase the entire box set, even though you should, because they'll all be uniform and look beautiful all together. But do we know what the price is for the full box set?
It'll probably be in the range of $250 to $300. We've got a couple of staff meetings to determine some of the formatting issues, but so we just to let you guys know, one of the things that we have discovered a new way we're going to do stuff around here when we have maps or inserts that go in books, we're no longer going to use those little glue tabs because it turns out they're damaging the book and they're damaging the map. So we're going to have folders put in the back of these books so that the maps or whatever it is goes into these folders. However, they're not cheap. So we've got to look at each of these books to see what it, like the Canton Crew comes with a full fold out map of the city of Luddenham. So that one's going to have one of these, and we'll have to kind of base it on that. But somewhere between 250 to 300 for the base 7 volumes.
Probably.
Yeah, probably. Don't quote me.
Please God, don't quote him. Please.
Yeah.
Me and Grace will be answering questions for months.
But they will be
Oh,
available. They'll be available individually as well.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people have asked, like, can I build my own? Like, I only want the book that I'm missing from my current collection. You can build your own pledge.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes, and I don't know, Ken, is this your appropriate place where you're talking about building the payment plan thing?
So we can't do that through Kickstarter, but we are looking into one of the things that we're doing for our site. You can already do this through PayPal. It's got the options you can do it. If you go over to the site, there's something that you can't afford at the moment, say the Robert E. Howard art books, which is $350, I think. We're going to set it up. Monica's looking to where you can come in and you can pay in installments, no interest, no late fees, no credit card fees, none of that, where you just pay in installments to TLG, and once it's paid, we ship it, or half paid, we ship it, or whatever, however we decide to do it. But we're working on that to kind of help, because this can be an expensive hobby, and I bought eggs the other day and they weren't cheap. So it's
No.
Yeah, this came up a few months ago about how expensive. Well, one, there's inflation, but two, I think Ken and I both had the same idea at the same time, a way to, be able to buy these things. Because when I look at the price of some things, I'm like, no, I'll put it on Klarna or something like that, and do like an installment plan or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now the Kickstarter, to be clear, the Kickstarter will not allow
Kickstarter can't do that.
It'll be.
Perhaps we should make them edible books.
Dude,
Now you're talking.
Now we're talking. Now we're cooking with gas.
That is the genius that we have been missing, Dan.
Well, hey, any book is edible.
Well, that is.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong.
Wait a second.
Yeah, yes, all termites agree with you. That is.
This is a great idea. Okay.
Is this the place for it, Davis?
Okay. All right.
Anyway,
Point made.
I know that we've gone a little bit over time. Any final thoughts from all y'all?
I've got a couple questions for Dave, or one question for Davis. Actually, there was people asking earlier, several asking about where we are on the Arms and Armor book. I think you're close to actually turning that in, aren't you?
I've turned over all the weapons, all the armor, and I'm done with I'm cleaning up the rules section, going in through putting some edits, and I should have, I think, the rest of the book to Kent. But what's today? Tuesday? Well, today was blown up, but probably at the end of next week, I should have the entire first book handed over and done with. Though Jeremy's reading it, I'm sending it to Jeremy to look at certain things, and he's like, "Well, Davis, you forgot this," and I was like, "I'll be damned." I forgot.
Whatever it is, it doesn't need it.
No, I
So-
think it might need it.
So that's halfway through or whatever, folks. That's the short answer of that. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
I
have-
have pretty much it. I think by next Friday, the Arms and Armor will be done, and then I don't know what I'm doing.
Now, I will say, Davis, you might finish it sooner if you have a good work day and don't quit in the middle of the work day. I'm just going to throw that out there.
I'll work on that.
No worries.
Last comments from me. I can't express how happy I am. Dan took the job. He had to kind of finagle his own schedule to help us on this, and I think it's the absolute perfect fit. And I have no doubt that both lines, this Castle Zagging and the GFW stuff, will be smooth sailing.
Thank you. It's exciting to work on it.
It'll be fun. A lot of fun. It's great to get this stuff out there.
oh yeah,
I'm
we're
glad
very
it's
excited.
not it for
I
us.
haven't seen Dan in years. I'm glad to see you online, man. I can't wait to see it.
All
Can't
right.
wait to see it.
Yes,
Gary
good to see you.
So we're gonna get
Oh,
these
God, I
giveaways
wish I could
done
make it.
and get out of here. All
We have a
right.
teleport.
No, wait. I have a giveaway. Wait.
Fantastic.
Oh, Lord.
Great.
Plane ticket.
Great. Fantastic.
I have some extra players' handbooks over here. They're just sitting in this pile of books that you can see behind me, right? So
Shall I put your address out in public? No, joking.
No. I'll send. They'll send you an address. Whoever can find the name of the game that I am looking for, I will send you a player's handbook from my scrap pile over there.
Oh my God, you can't make this shit
it
up.
starts with an S.
Oh my god.
All right, wrap it up, Chuck. Let's get through these.
Let's get out of here.
Let's send it to Chuck. Send that name to Chuck, or just put it on Twitter. So I don't know. I'll make a list on Twitter.
They can find me. Don't worry.
And man, maybe next Monday or something we'll do like a WoW game.
Yeah, we'll do something for sure.
Doing something on stream all together, that'd be fun.
So, real quick before I do the giveaways, just want to tell everybody thank you for coming out of here. We'll be back in the morning. I'll be doing my show on Wednesday mornings. We talk about world building, and if Davis is on, and maybe Jeremy, if they ever, whatever, they'll be around. And then we'll be back Thursday. We're probably going to do a little more talk about this and take some more questions and whatnot. So, and then we'll have some games this weekend. So, actually, we'll be off this weekend, actually. Yeah, I forgot about that. Glad I remembered. Grace, we're off this weekend. All right, it's both streams.
Okay.
Disturbed concert and con I'm going to. Anyways, there's a Twitch schedule. Let's do these giveaways. All right. These are for $10 off PDF giveaways. I'm going to close the entries out. And let's pick our first of 40,000 winners. No, I'm kidding. We're giving away 5. All right. We're going to do.
If you're in the stream, you're already a winner.
That's right. That's right. And the first winner's up. Congrats. DJ, all you got to do is go over to our Discord, join it, and look for Obsidian Risk. He's a community team member, and just message him, or you can tag him in Discord, and he will find you and get you your code. Our next winner will be Asher the Bear. Asher knows the drill. We can move on. Congrats, Asher. Good job, Dale. All right, next up is Durados. You were asking earlier about the Kickstarter thing. Just hop over to our Discord. There's the link. And see Obsidian Risk. Congrats. Next winner is going to be Delport Brecklin. Oh, congrats. Awesome.
Ooh.
Let's see. That's 1, 2, 3. I got to make sure that I've not given away too many. How many is that so far? We'll do one more.
That's 4.
Yeah, that would be 5 right there, right? Tomcat Dad. There you go, Tom.
Hey.
Always winning. Awesome. Fantastic.
Trolls.
Trollza. All right, let's get out of here. Any last thoughts before I send us on out of here?
No, I'm good.
Thank you all for showing up.
Yeah,
is a hot dog like a taco?
All right, we're going to go. We're going to raid on out of here. All right.
That's a legit question. I'm going to lose sleep over that.
You're welcome.
All right, everybody, y'all have a good evening. We really appreciate you. All right. Thank you so much.
Take it easy, everybody.
All right.
Bye.